All right. Can you hear me? Are we on?
You doing the prayer? You doing the prayer?
Good pledge.
We're good. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, good evening. It's I saw, was it the El Arroyo sign? It's like, it's like I get tired of going to sleep at midnight and I look at the clock and it's 6 p.m. And so anyway, so it's like, it seems a lot later than it is. But again, thank you guys for being here. We're going to start with Pledge Allegiance to the U.S. flag led by Councilmember Stephanie O'Banion. Texas Pledge will be led by Communications Director Paul Romer, and then I will give the invocation.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Dear Lord, just thank you for this day. Thank you for the great weather to remind us what goodness can be. And so we just praise you for that. We obviously want to pray for rain during these months so that the lakes and aquifers can refill. And we just want to pray for the community and continue to work together. I'd like to pray for our state and legislatures and those that continue to go into extended session. We just pray that the strife and the conflict that we have against each other, even at the local level, can ease, and that we can work to solve real problems in statesman's types of ways. And for the world that just seems to be on the brink, pray for peace. We pray for your hand to be on this world and on this nation, and just guide the deliberations tonight. In your name we pray.
Amen.
All right. Gavel time. It is, I'll call this November 14th City Council meeting to order at 5:32. The first item at our public comments. I know we have at least one public comment. Somebody verbally told me. So if no one from the floor. All right.
I've got one public comment. A couple weeks ago, Mayor Lee set his place on fire, and the fire department came to show off their skills. And then this week, I knocked a big tree down in my yard, and Officer Schwint and Officer Carter were quick to come put out some cones, and then the Public Works Department was quick to show up and clear this. A special thank you, especially to Kyle, Melissa, and Forrest from the Public Works Department. They made quick work of a 100-year-old oak tree that was blocking the road. So appreciate it. If you see me out in the yard crying over my tree, just cruise on by and leave me alone.
Oh, wow. Did you get your bill yet?
I'm waiting on the reimbursement for the.
Yeah, I guess for those of us who like to solve problems, like to create the problems first, and then we bring in some volunteers to help solve them. Thank you. Thank you again, those that help. All right. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I will read all of these items 3 through 7. And if the council wishes to pull any of these for separate discussion, they may do so. Item 3 is consider minutes of the October 24th council meeting. Item 4 is consider adopting an ordinance for the budget amendment number 2 to the 2023 annual budget. Item 5 is to consider an ordinance adopting the budget amendment number 1 to the City of Belton 2024 annual budget. Item 6 is consider authorizing the city manager to extend an agreement for visitor center support for the Belton Area Chamber of Commerce for fiscal year 2024. And item 7 is to consider authorizing the city to enter into an agreement with transit services with Hill Country Transit District fiscal year 2024. Did I read those correctly?
Yep. Mayor, I'd like to approve items 3, 4, 6, and 7.
I'd like to pull item number 5. That's fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
So a motion for 3, 4, 6, and 7, and simultaneously pulling number 5. So all in favor. Second. So all in favor of 3, 4, 6, and 7, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 5. All right, Mr. Rogers. Always like a Mr. Rogers hour.
I'm going to abstain from item 5.
Okay, yeah, Council Member Dave Covington will be abstaining from this item.
Good afternoon, good night. Yeah, I agree with you, Mayor and Council. It's not even Christmas and we're already in fiscal year 2024 budget. but it's all good. So that's a good thing. So we had 5 things that need to be added or changed to the fiscal 24 budget. First item relates to a grant that the city received in 20. The city received a burn discretionary community project funding grant during fiscal year 2023 in the amount of $374,000. That grant provides funding for body worn cameras, public safety radios, a radar speed trailer, and other incident response equipment. We spent $219,000 of that in fiscal 23. This revision item adds $155,000 to reflect the grant funding that's available in fiscal 24. The second revision item, and we also received a COPS grant recently. And so that grant is $375,000 or $125,000 per year. The revision number 2 increases the general fund revenue by $125,000 and the police patrol division expenditures by $232,590 to reflect the COPS grant activity that we expect in fiscal 24. The third item, when we adopted the budget for fiscal 2024, we included $40,940 for 2 part-time dispatchers. That's 1 full-time equivalent and 2 part-times, 1 full-time equivalent. It's become apparent over the months that 1 full-time dispatcher would serve the police department better than 2 part-time dispatchers. And revision item number 3 increases the general fund expenditures by $8,620 due to the extra cost, mostly of benefits related to a full-time position instead of 2 part-time positions. Revision item number 4 relates to the water and sewer fund. For fiscal 2024, we included $80,000 for 2 Chevy Silverado pickups for the water and sewer fund. They were Johnny on the spot with delivery. In fact, that they delivered those trucks on September the 29th of 2020, which made it a 2023 expenditure, not a 2024 expenditure. And so item number 4 reduces the expenditures in the water and sewer fund by $80,000 because of that fiscal year charge. The last item relates to the Belton Economic Development Corporation. On June 13th of 2023, City Council authorized BDC Executive Director to execute a contract with B&D Mays Limited Partnership for the purchase of 8.78 acres of land on 6th Avenue and Birdwell. Revision item number 5 increases appropriations in the land account of the EDC fund by $1 million to cover the land acquisition plus any related costs that may be incurred by the corporation. Staff recommends approval of budget amendment number 1 to the City of Belton fiscal 2024 annual budget.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Chair would entertain a motion, or if you have any comments or questions of the items.
I move we approve agenda item number 5 as presented. Second.
A motion and a second to approve agenda item 5, and then ask any comments or questions about this. All right, and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, motion passes with 6 yay, 1 abstention. Item number 8, consider a final plat for Cedar Crest amending plat comprising 38.25 acres located at 3500 South Interstate 35.
Thank you, members of the council. This item is coming back to you after having been tabled at the last meeting. And just want to give you a quick summary. This amending plat, I think you're all pretty familiar with it. It's the proposal for Cedar Crest to do an expansion. The applicant has proposed to consolidate the property, the 25-acre original site, and then the proposed 13-acre site to expand the facility. You can see the zoning's fine, water and sewer are available, no extensions are required, and civil drainage plans are under review right now. Again, here's just so that you can kind of visualize the area. The entire tract is the consolidated plat, as you can see here. The southernmost piece was platted in 2018. That's the 25-acre tract. And then the tract that's been submitted where the addition is going to go is the northernmost piece, the 13-acre located here. First, I want to just touch on street right of way for the two streets. This was a subject of some discussion at the last meeting. And so the street right of way for Capitol Way and Mesquite. Capitol Way is proposed as a, I want to go back one and show you. Again, Capitol Way is the street that's on the east side. Mesquite is on the south side of the property. And so Capitol Way is proposed on the eastern boundary. The developers proposing a 40-foot right-of-way dedication on the plat in this expanded plat boundary. 40 feet was also dedicated in the 2018 plat for the previous Cedar Crest plat. Mesquite, the road on the south side, is a major collector. 40 feet was dedicated when that property was platted back in 2018. So right-of-way is in good shape. We need no additional right-of-way from the applicant on either of the two streets. The perimeter street improvement requirements, this is a subject that was discussed at the last meeting, and just a quick summary of how that reads. Basically, basic requirement is for 1/2 of the street pavement, 18.5 feet, one side of curb and gutter, and 5-foot sidewalk. With the original plat in 2018, the realignment of Mesquite was a major topic at that time. We had KPA come in and do some assessment for us. We looked at the surrounding properties, and the alignment of that street at that point in time just didn't seem to fit anybody's needs, ours or the property owners, the developers, and so forth. So with the support of Cedar Crest, Ellen Morris, Mesquite was relocated to the southern boundary of the Cedar Crest property. At that time, actually, two companion agenda items. One was the amendment of the thoroughfare plan, and then the plat followed that. And in conjunction with the plat, a request for varying the requirements for Mesquite improvements was approved in 2018. And so just to keep that history in mind, the cost estimate the applicant has provided for today's dollars is just under $1 million for Mesquite Road. And remember, we asked the applicant to provide the expanded boundary to incorporate a consolidated plat. And so that was in, I think, everybody's best interest, but it did trigger the question, at least for Mesquite. Again, we showed you this map last time, and it references the surrounding rights of way that have been dedicated time, and also the contributions to street improvements. Just to give you a quick summary of the situation, we have in hand right now about $154,000 for clay from previous contributions from Cedar Crest, from the RV park, and the other properties, the 3 properties. The proposal by the applicant is to contribute their share for the area adjacent to the proposed hospital expansion, this area here, of $187,000. There's been no discussion or debate about it, and they're willing to do that. That would give us almost $350,000 for the road. And Capitol Way sure seems to be the more important road right now. And we would certainly like to move on out and get that road designed and hopefully begin some planning for construction in the near future. Mesquite is certainly a future need, but does not have quite the priority of Capitol Way in our minds. So when the plat was pulled at your October 24th meeting, we asked you to do that in order for us to do 3 things. Get with TxDOT and confirm their position on Mesquite Road and the existing and proposed Cedar Crest driveways, to evaluate the TIA that the applicant had provided, and then to confirm the history of the action that occurred when thoroughfare plan was amended and the original plat was approved in 2018. TxDOT's response was very, very positive. We had them on a call with us, and very, very quickly they remembered the discussion from 2018 and had files to reflect it, and indicated that they concurred with the proposed location of Mesquite at the intersection with the frontage road. They reiterated their support for the Cedar Crest driveway and the proposed northern driveway for Cedar Crest. So TxDOT was addressed in a very favorable way in our mind. The second item was the TIA. Cedar Crest provided a TIA to us indicating minimal impact on I-35 from the proposed Cedar Crest expansion. Obviously, they'll have a driveway in that location on the frontage road, but very, very minimal impact in terms of the hospital operation. There are no anticipated impacts to Mesquite Road from Cedar Crest since driveway access is not currently proposed. So that was very telling to us and helped inform our recommendation in terms of the proportionality issue. So then the last item was the thoroughfare plan update and Cedar Crest's approval history back in 2018. So again, in 2018, the thoroughfare plan was amended, as I mentioned, to place Mesquite Road on the south side of the Cedar Crest property. The initial plat that was submitted at that time was approved with a variant, excuse me, a variant for contribution to Mesquite Road improvements. And we supported that request. And that's important for council's consideration. Again, a lot of discussion going on at that time, and the relocation of this is important for all parties, and we supported the variance request. So our recommendation to the council is to approve the Cedar Crest amending plat, acknowledging these several items. TxDOT support for future Mesquite location and the driveways. The TIA indicates no impact to Mesquite, and so really it's just not a reasonable suggestion for this subdivision plat to require contribution to Mesquite improvements. The variance to Mesquite Perimeter Street improvements was approved in 2018. That remains valid in our mind for the amending plat, and is proposing a right-of-way dedication for Capitol Way and improvements contribution of just under $200,000 for the expanded plat boundary. So we're very comfortable with the plat moving forward, finalizing that, and certainly allowing the hospital to proceed. And we appreciate the council's time just to thoroughly evaluate all the conditions associated with this item.
All right. So this is not a public hearing, so this is just for council consideration. So any well, again, we'll entertain a motion and also questions that you may have.
I think it's straightforward. I just want to say thanks to Luke for, reaching out to us, and thanks to the staff for taking our words and looking at it, and I think making it work for everybody. So, that said, I'd like to make a motion to approve this agenda.
Second.
So we have motion and a second to approve the final plat for Cedar Crest amendment or Cedar Crest plat. Any other final questions or comments? All right, I'm glad we could work more stuff out. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously. All right. Next item on the agenda is a work session and receiving a presentation on utility rate study and setting process and considering various policy issues in the development for a utility rate study for 2024 fiscal years 2024 through 28. Mr. Rogers again.
Mayor and Council, in 2021, the city of Belton hired Melissa Hedden Consulting LLC to perform a rate design study for the city's water and wastewater utility. That study was completed in August of 2022 with the approval of Resolution 2022-27R that established a 5-year rate structure for fiscal years 2023 to 2027. You're probably aware that we have some very large projects coming our way. A water plant expansion project, wastewater treatment plant expansion project, very costly distribution projects on our radar, and then some additional residential users that we have to accomplish, that we have to work out in our rates. So that's causing us to expedite a new study. We hired Melissa again to perform a rate study, but what we're asking council tonight is to provide some feedback on policies, and these are true policy things that you tell us what you want in our future rate structure. Things like winter averaging, billing for commercial industrial classes, apartments, etc. All of that are policy decisions that council will make. So Ms. Hedden is here to kind of go through what these things mean, their options mean for you. We'd appreciate any feedback that you give us. That will go into her work in bringing back a proposed rate structure. Lots of work of us, but that we want your input now before she does a whole lot of work. So Melissa Hedden.
Good evening, council. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Thank you for your time. This evening, we will be touching on and talking a little bit about the driving forces behind why we're here again today, and then policy issues. Mike already kind of hit the high notes there on the driving forces. Essentially, you've got some additional capital needs that weren't contemplated in the last study that we need to go ahead and identify what that would do to your rates and make sure funding sources available to pay for those projects as they come down your pike. The other thing, you want to reflect additional development that the previous study didn't contemplate that's now here, which is a thing. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at good rates for you as we make some recommendations going forward. That being said, we're coming to you today. We do not have any numbers. We're not going to go over any proposed rates. We're just kicking off the study and getting our hands dirty with all the numbers. But what we are doing today is bringing to you some potential policy issues that, should council feel comfortable giving some direction on, it would be appreciated. These are things, there are 5 different policy issues we'll talk about tonight. And we want to make sure that any recommendations we make are reflective of your policies. They're important to you and your community. So there's 5 issues that we'll go through tonight. To the extent council has additional policy issues that we aren't talking about, please let me know, because we want to make sure we address these things. That being said, to the extent you feel comfortable giving some direction, it would be great. You don't have to. But the reason why the direction is got lots of choices there. If we knew what direction you prefer, then we can bring you fewer because 5 times 5, that's a whole lot of options, and I don't see that being a very fruitful process. So we're going to start here with policy item number 1, which is winter averaging. Before I get into winter averaging, we first have to understand what operationally with our wastewater utility and how we bill customers. So for wastewater, unlike water, we do not meter wastewater. So what happens, the customer's water is metered as it goes into the property, but when it comes back out, there's not a meter there. That's just industry practice. It's very impractical to meter wastewater, and also there's all sorts of things in there that throw the metering process off. So we typically do not meter sewage. Yes, it's gross. That being said, since we don't meter sewage, we have to have a reasonable means of billing our customers and try to bill on what they're using. So the city of Belton currently, if you're a commercial customer, you're billed for 100% of your water. So whatever comes through your tap as water, the assumption that 100% of that is coming back through the tap as sewage. That's because most commercial customers aren't irrigating outside. And so it really is a reasonable assumption. If you're washing dishes, it's coming out the faucet and going straight back down that drain. Residential customers, however, we are not metering them. But residential customers oftentimes have beautiful lawns and pools and gardens and things like that they're watering during parts of. And so water metering is not really reflective of what's coming back to the system as sewage. That being said, the city of Belton currently charges customers for 100% of their water use up to 15,000 gallons. So we assume that everything up to 15,000 gallons is coming straight back as sewage. Quite frankly, this is a very high threshold. We have typical cities as winter average. When we look at a typical household, we anticipate somewhere in the 4,000 or 5,000 gallon range coming back as sewage. But the city of Belton, you've got this 15,000. So what's happening is a residential household likely is sending 5,000 gallons of sewer back to the city, but we're billing them all the way up to that 15,000 gallon threshold. Your average household, probably their sewer bill goes lower in the winter, and then in the summer, not only does their water bill go up, but their sewer also. This is not within guidelines of industry best management practice. What industry best management practice does is we look at what we winter averaging. The assumption we make here is that in winter months, your average residential household is not irrigating. They're probably not filling their pool. And so whatever they're using water in the winter months is really coming back to the system as sewage. So a winter averaging process, essentially what we do is for each individual household in March of every year, when the winter's over, we look at their winter average. We prefer to look at the months of November, January, February. We skip December because people are on vacation or they have a house full of guests. And we look at their average for those 3 winter months. And whatever that number is, that's what the basis of sewer billing will be for the entire next year. We do recommend we bill that or their actual water consumption, whichever is lowest. So if somebody's on vacation summer or whatever, they're not getting hit with a sewer bill when they clearly didn't use anything. New customers to the system would be billed the citywide average until they establish their own winter average. So we look at the citywide, whatever that average number is, and that's what they would pay until they establish their own. This is considered the industry best management practice because it's most likely reflects the closest to what customers are actually using, the service they're actually using. What will likely happen should the city of Belton go to winter averaging is this is pure math. And all we're doing is we're taking a cost. We have to get that cost and we're dividing it by some sort of a denominator. If you're doing the 15,000 gallon cap, that number is going to be higher. So the resultant rates are going to be lower. If we're doing the winter averaging, that denominator is going to be lower. So the volumetric rate would be higher. But customers billing, we take that volumetric rate, it's a lower number. The goal here is to make it more fair and equitable among your customers. So those customers who are not using lots and lots of water, the water they're using is going outside. They're not using that much sewage, don't have to pay for it. That being said, this is the first policy issue we wanted to introduce to you. You do not have to vote tonight, but to the extent there is some direction council would like to give to us on this issue, we'd love to hear it.
Those with irrigation meters are handled separately, correct?
Yes,
That's
sir.
kind of obvious.
Excellent question. So those who have a separate irrigation meter, their irrigation meter, this doesn't apply to.
Just off the top concerns, you said it, we're gonna have to capture that same revenue anyway. I mean, if we have to capture the whole piece of the pie, there's gotta be a better way to capture the pie. I don't know if it's possible, I don't know how the systems work, but what I mentioned in our briefing meeting was a month rolling average. And then that way they have stable billing throughout the year. Take the 12-month rolling average, that could potentially be what they get billed for each month for sewage. Now, they wouldn't see that spike in the summer because we're spread it out. And then we also don't have to worry about anybody gaming the system. I mean, you hear about people, you can game the system. There's ways to do it. You avoid all that. You're still capturing the same 100% of the pie, just in a more stable rate versus having an immediate drop in usage, but having to jack rates up to cover for it. That's just my opinion.
Sure. The only flaw to that is that you're requiring those who are using more of the water outside for outdoor purposes, irrigating their lawns, filling their pools, things of those natures. They're paying a bigger piece of pay than they're realistically sending back to your system as sewage.
They are, but we have a method in place where they can avoid that. And there's a fee to that as well, but that could be a separate topic in a separate meeting to how can we make that a more process. But we have a method to do it. I don't, to me, having a second meter
Pretty expensive.
So,
yeah, but I mean,
and appreciate the feedback. I'm not trying to shut that down by any chance. It's possible that you could do both. Essentially what you could, if you took like an electric company that may say, just like you said, an average bill our year would be just based upon the dollar amount of the bill, however that bill is calculated. See what I'm saying? You could still do an average and kind of, what would that bill be? The thing I'll caution before we commit too much to that is I need to make sure there's no system limitations to that. And then you also, a 12-month period is an awful long time for somebody new. And, you know, how do you handle that first 12 months? And then there may be some discrepancies or inequities among customers, new
Neighborhood
customers
average.
versus that kind of thing. And just to clarify too, on winter averaging, when we say we're going to bill that the rest of the year, there are two ways to do that. As Nilison referenced, it's not really a cap. It's more of a cap than it would be. This is what the number is. At least that's my experience, the way I've had passed. It would be if you use less water, it's the lesser of actual water usage that winter. It's not like this is what will be billed for an entire year, unless you're exceeding that, of course. And where that became an issue this year with the drought is we had many more people consuming water closer to that 15,000 gallon mark, not quite there to hit a cap, but maybe instead of previous summers where they were using, say, 8,000 gallons or 10,000 gallons of water, now they were pushing this 15. And so the dollar on their sewer charge was a lot higher than they've seen in the past. If we go to a winter averaging type methodology there, that would be it would be more reflective of what's being returned back to the system because it's based upon the volumes in the winter months when they're not irrigating. So I'm getting this.
That's great. The other comment I would make is that essentially you're making the cap customizable. So instead of $15,000 for everybody, or excuse me, 15,000 gallons for everybody, that cap is based off of your winter average. Which is likely reflective of what you're really sending back. And it's just customized for each individual household. So if you have a household with 2 people living in it, that winter average may be 2,000 or 3,000 gallons, much easier to swallow. And then people like me who have a teenage daughter at home, that number's probably in the 7,000 gallon range. And so we're making those of us with teenagers at home pay for what we're using more. And then the households with 2 or 3 people in them who are not an hour and a half long showers on a regular basis, they're not going to pay. Their bills will be lower.
I think it's a fair way to bill. I like the concept. I'd like to see the change in revenue and the impact that it might impose during some of those winter months, or not paying the sewer during the summer on excess water usage. So no, I encourage exploring that proposal or winter averaging. I'll also be curious to know how many of our neighbors are doing that or already implemented that, and how we compare. Are we behind in getting that started?
I agree with John. Since we're not going to meter poop, thankfully, this is probably as close as we're going to get. And I think it's closer than what we're doing now.
Absolutely.
And any of us still have the option for an additional meter, given that it's really expensive. When you run the numbers, it's probably not worth it. So I like this concept, but I do think we need to see the numbers and it'll come out with the study, I'm sure.
Sure.
And those rates are higher on the separate meter for water only.
Right. Correct.
Currently, you got to factor it all in. You got to do it.
That's like sprinklers right now. We're charging extra. That's another policy issue.
Is it on the list that we're going to discuss?
She can work that in there.
Okay.
That's a story, yes.
Okay.
Under where it says other input.
Okay.
Yeah, we have
I'm just
we did implement with this latest study a higher rate for sprinklers. If you aren't comfortable with that, we can bring back what it would look like without that. I don't know how difficult that is.
We'll
Maybe that's
discuss
a
that on
no-brainer.
5. We'll keep this one on poop.
Got it.
I have just a quick clarifying question on this. So I had a citizen reach out to me about their water bill this last week. No names. It was my mother. Her
name's Kay.
Her name's Kay. Yeah. Her water was, like $40. The sewer was nearly double that.
Right.
So this potential type of thing may lower that sewer
Absolutely.
cost.
Absolutely. What we'll do will even the playing field. So people like your mother who may be living by herself or with your mother and your father, their winter average is probably really low. And what was driving that was likely she irrigated her last month or whatever. And so she had a high water consumption, but realistically come back to sewers. So
So one question on those and then a general comment. So one question is that somebody who has a second meter, do we still charge a minimum?
No,
So we've gotten rid of the minimum.
we did that. Was
Okay,
in
that's what I-
exchange,
We did that last
that was in exchange for a higher rate.
Yep, that's what I thought I remembered. So,
Yes.
okay, so that's good. The other one is, there will be winners and losers of this when we switch.
yes, sir.
So those people who have a second, have spent the money on the second meter are gonna now see an increased rate, sewer rate because of this. We're going to be metering sewer consumption. Like the total number of gallons that we're currently billing sewer is gonna go down.
Right.
But we still need the same general X number of dollars. So while that goes down, the per gallon is gonna go up.
Sure.
So there are going to be those primarily commercial and those with a second meter that are going to be potentially significantly impacted.
So that is an absolute possibility. And that's the reference earlier about somebody gaming the system is by putting on your separate meter. Everybody else has to pay for whatever they may be using outside in the summer up to that 15,000 gallon cap. And the person currently which is a minority of the customers in Belton who may have that second meter, they actually did a little personalized workaround for not having to pay as high as sewer bill.
Yeah.
And so their volumetric rate will go up and their sewer bill will go up a little
Yeah,
bit.
and while commercial, they're paying what they use, right? So
Correct.
I think the thing that we're going to really need to manage is really when we do this study is analyze what that impact is going to be for everybody who so 2 months ago, I bought a second meter and now you're telling me you're going to do this and I didn't have to buy that second meter. We're going to have a lot of those comments. Not a lot. We will have very vocal comments, those that do say something.
Sure.
And it'll seem like it's a lot, even only be 4 people named K. I don't know.
She does not have a second meter. I
But
assure you.
anyway, but I think that the unintended consequences, it might be at least if we come back with something, and this is the way we go, we need to probably analyze what the unintended consequence is.
Sure. So a couple things that I heard you all say is potentially this, and we could probably bring you a scenario based off of winter averaging and a scenario without. And can give you 2 other pieces of homework I wrote down. One is what your neighboring cities are doing. And 2, maybe we can give some sample bills. In the past, what I've done is not mentioning any names, but 6 people who may or may, or 7 people who may or may sitting in this room, we can give you a look at your bills and give you a comparison with and to give a sense of what that would look like.
Yeah, that'd be really great.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can definitely do that for you.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Any other comments?
It's to your discretion.
It feels like the general consensus is we'd like to entertain winter averaging as a proposal. So,
Okay.
yeah, sure.
Okay. Great. Well, let's go to item number 2, which are tiered rates. So essentially a tiered rate design, they're also known as conservation rates, is where essentially we do kind of like taxes. So we will do a certain block of up to maybe 5,000 gallons of consumption at a lower rate. And the next block of consumption, maybe 5 to 10,000, another higher rate. And then as you get more and more into consumption, your rates go up. The exact level of the tiers we would look at scientifically, look at where the breaks are, what your consumption looks like. But the reason why we would do this, there are several reasons. The first reason for tiered rates are, I mentioned conservation rates. So essentially, when we charge more for water, we're encouraging an efficient use of water and making those who are using lots and lots of water pay more their use. The second reason is there is some cost basis for that. Essentially, higher tiered customers, especially in the residential and irrigation realm, are the ones who are putting this huge burden on the system associated with their peaking. So this requires them to pay that incremental additional cost that they're putting on the system. The third reason why communities go to tiered rates is because it is a way to implement what I call a lifeline rate. Essentially, that lowest tier we can set at a lower amount so that it gives people some control over their utility bill. And those who are using maybe 4,000 gallons of water a month, which is a very low water bill, they're going to pay a lot less even on their per 1,000-gallon basis. It infuses some affordability there. So you all can look at your citizens and say, look, we tried to give indoor domestic use, which is your critical use to live. We included that in that lower tier. And so you have a lot of control over bill. Exterior water use for irrigating and filling your pool and watering your lawn, that's more off-type use. And so a lot of these use that as we're going to put in a lifeline rate, and then the higher rates are for those optional, if you will. This again is an industry best management practice among utilities. You can either do tiered rates, or the current policy is everybody, doesn't matter how much you use, your volumetric rate is the same. So those are the options there. This typically would apply to residential customers as well as irrigation customers. So thoughts on that one?
About commercial customers?
Commercial customers, typically we do not do tiered rates for them because their usage is not for exterior purposes. So if you're chilies, you're going to use the same amount close to every month. And if you are using it for exterior irrigation purposes, you would have a separate meter. So typically we don't have a cost, because what it does is it penalizes big business. Because, if we have, and basically your restaurants, it really is hard on your restaurants. So you could have two customers, a PetSmart and a Chili's. They could have identical size meters, and the Chili's would be using copious amounts of water and paying a very high rate. And so you're really penalizing those bigger businesses. So that's typically do that.
I thought we did, maybe not tiered, but I thought it was based on pipe size.
That's the base
for
rate.
commercial.
Yes, great question. So your base rate is based off of meter size. That is your basic fee, which usually covers a little bit of the debt for the infrastructure that was installed to serve you, and your customer service costs, which is your meter reading and billing activity. And so the volumetric rate is what is everybody pays the same. Yes, and in a tiered rate design.
I think it's critical that we review that for commercial, the volumetric, because I think we had a report from KTMP or whoever it was, in the top 10 users, a lady on 13th, the car wash, and 4 or 5 other businesses or school district or somebody like that, and it all at the flat rate based on their pipe size. And some of those usage amounts were unbelievable. And we aren't collecting anything extra for, 100,000 gallons a month or whatever. And so there's no deterrent not to use any more. Just turn it on and let it flow. It's the same rate.
And that also will come to the next item, gets into customer classes, and that's where you may also look at them.
Perfect.
So leading question number 1, however we calculate the rates, we're going to be collecting the amount of money we need to collect to pay for the water that's being used.
That is correct.
We're just choosing how to distribute.
Yes,
that.
sir.
So this is an incentivization tool, not a pay the bill tool.
That's correct.
Okay.
So to be very clear, any rates we bring you, you're going to be able to pay your bills. We're going to make sure of that.
I hope we don't incentivize people not to build a pool or to do a 1 acre lot or to purchase the lot next to them for more room and
yeah. So that was the leading question. So where I'm going with this is I think there's to me, I'll say there's 4. So I think there's a commercial element, and we do have some some customers that are huge users and we could say abusers, because we don't have a lot of industry that uses water. We have some restaurants, but restaurants are on the smaller side. But I think that there's several key commercial customers that we probably need to look at. If you're going to use it, you're going to pay for it, because especially this summer, when we had to start cutting rates. So I think we need to really think about the tiered on commercials. So there's that. And then for everybody else, I think there's 3 levels. I think those that are low users impact people. I think they should be, let's say the average is X, that they should pay 80% of X, right? We're going to incentivize that if a household can use only X number of gallons per person in the household, you are a good person and allowing this community to be sustainable. So I think we need to consider that, especially with water in the area. So I think we need to consider lower than, and it's not going to be a ton of people that are there, but at least it's achievable. I think that's one. I think the other one is just regular use. And I like what John said, you know, hey, you have a pool, you have a regular size yard. That's normal living, right? You just pay the rate. But then there's the disincentive, right? You got 10 acres of St. Augustine and you got 2 pools and a splash pad, whatever. And you're going to pay a ton of money for that. So I think that there needs to be a punitive, I'll say punitive, there needs to be an incentive level to bring it down, another incentive level to keep it down. Everybody else pays regular, right? I think that's kind of where we're looking. I don't think we want it to be super complicated, like 8 different levels.
Sure.
Say, I mean, if we switch to a winter averaging, I mean, could
winter averaging?
No, I'm saying, could you not use that same cap for regular water usage? And if you blow over that, that would be a little higher for a normal user. Because I mean, if we're going to know what you're using when you're not watering your yard, then we should know what you're using when you are watering your yard.
Yeah, so it's hey, if you game the system, you won this game, you lost that game, right? So you're going to get paid for any gallon above that. I don't know. It's
penalty, but I mean,
yeah, we'll pay more.
Yeah, I mean, if we're really trying to.
So this, I guess, more of a Matt question. So when we look at some of our apartment complexes that are high users, if we divide it by the number of people in the apartment complex, is most of that water being used by the people, or is it being used in the sprinkler systems?
Definitely, we can definitely break that down. I would say that they do have a large kind of front door presence, right? They're incentivized to make sure that their grounds look nice. So they're definitely big irrigation users. I'm not gonna name them, but you know who they are. So that would be kind of something to consider, but it would be good to know. I was just talking with John, we're referencing the top 50, Councilmember Holmes referenced, and that's definitely something to factor in that, hey, listen, when you're talking about this apartment complex, they've got hundreds of units, you know, versus this unit that may have 50 or so. So I hope that we'll definitely break that down for you, but they do have a similar curb appeal desire, like the users who say, hey, listen, we need people when they come here to want to rent an apartment from us. We can't have bone dry, dead grass and trees and shrubs. So
some of the apartment complexes separately needed.
Yeah.
So you can look at them.
Yep.
And look at the others and get a pretty good idea of what irrigation.
Yeah. And I recall we had a spreadsheet, I thought maybe by pipe size or something that showed usage, and you know, the top 10 to 15 were using 75% of the water for the group. I mean, it was just really amazing. And they're not being charged anything extra for massive usage. And that's where I think the tiered system for and maybe I don't know about all the pipe sizes. I didn't like that so much as going to commercial versus residential and then saying, hey, if based on your usage, your rate is X.
Well, John, I agree with you. I agree we need to go to the tiered system. A fairer system, it would be a better system. Pipe sizes does play into, if we're going to furnish that much volume, this huge volume, then we've got to have bigger pipe. You know, we got to pay more for infrastructure to support that. So I think before we throw that out, we really need to look at it closely.
And
buying an option on future water is going to cost money.
And maybe also compare that to surrounding areas, because I did look at some of those, and most of them, you know, it was commercial with the premium for X number of gallons a month.
On pipe size or meter size or whatever, when we build a new subdivision today, what size meter or is the residential customer getting?
It's 5/8 and 5/8 or 3/4, and that's all. That's our low rate.
Okay, is every house in historic Belton, old downtown central Belton, are they also on that same, or do we don't
That's
have
the-
some
that's
that
the
have
typical. Well,
old 2-inch
we have
pipes
a
from-
handful of meters, probably at the residents' choosing, right?
I want to say that, we have about over almost 9,000 meters at this point, probably well over 7,000 or 5/8 by 3/4. Some overwhelming majority are that size. And then you have the larger kind of scales up, so.
There's a spreadsheet that listed all that last year. We could get resent maybe.
And we can bring you that data as we proceed with the study to show you how many and who's affected within realms. The meter size billing is really your tool to make, as was mentioned earlier, the bigger the meter you have, the greater ability you have for an instantaneous demand. So it doesn't matter if I ever actually take a drop of water, just by virtue of putting that meter in the ground, the city of Belton has to have the infrastructure in place to provide me with service based off the size of that meter. And so what that base charge does is because you've got a two-part bill, you have a base charge and a volumetric charge. What that base charge does is it says, you want that meter? Here you have to pay for half of the debt associated, or a percentage. We'll look at rates and what that percentage is, but you've got to pay for a certain piece of that debt associated with having the infrastructure in place to provide you service. And that's just covering that debt. And then we have a couple dollars in there for reading your meter and sending you a bill. But that's why we typically look at the meter size. And the overwhelming majority of those larger meters are all commercials in apartment complexes. Those are your car wash. They're all going to have a bigger meter in the ground.
All right, I think consensus again is for tiered rates, so we'll look at those, but I don't think we want to kill it.
Sure. Well, then we'll go to item number 3, which is billing based off of customer class. So essentially, currently, all of your customers are billed the same volumetric rate, regardless of class of customer. It doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter your burden you're putting on the system. Everybody's billed the same volumetric rate. Again, another thing that the industry has evolved to is charging a different volumetric based off of different customer classes. Usually we would look at residential, commercial, sprinkler, car wash as mentioned earlier. You can get pretty sophisticated with a number of classes of customers. There is a little balancing act there because you don't want to make it so complicated within your billing system. But this is a way to achieve equity, making those bigger classes who are putting this huge burden on your system have to pay for those that use and that level of use. Thoughts on that one?
So what I've typically dealt with in my past is an apartment, 3 classes, residential, commercial, and apartment classes. All 3 of those kind of different usage patterns, separate demands on the system. And it's relatively simple with just 3 customer classes. Then all 3 of those classes may pay a different volumetric rate, probably the same base rate based upon meter size, but the volumetric rate may be different for each of those classes. So again, your homeowner, a residential customer with lower usage, things like that, could pay potentially a lower volumetric rate. Whereas your apartments, the high users and things like that could pay. They don't mean they have to. I'm just saying that's what you could.
So item 1 was sewer. Item 2 is water. Item 3 is both. You would have 2 classes for each, or multiple classes for each of the 2 categories. You were a X class that applies to both sewer and water rates.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It is you can do it either way. Some communities charge the same sewer rate, doesn't matter your customer class. Other communities will do it based off a customer class for both water and sewer.
But please help me if I'm wrong here. On the wastewater side, however, sewer is more residential in nature, say a commercial establishment, typically. Apartments would have high sewer usage. But commercial would certainly have probably less wastewater than a residential.
It might be less
so
wastewater, but it might be higher risk wastewater.
That's also true. So it can be as
So-
complicated as you guys, this is again, a policy decision.
I mean, I think that they probably both sides need classes. I don't think that they're one-to-one. I think especially because we've had several discussions on people that may come in that may be high users and it may actually impact the affluent or whatever we call the, affluent. So I think that we may need to consider, anyway, I don't know,
Sure.
something on the
Interested
source.
in exploring
To
it,
address
but
that
don't
real
want-
quick, what we find on the water side, well, let me address a generality and then we'll get into specifics on the sewer side. So generally speaking, we've got a cost associated with serving customers. And we go through when we figure out that cost and in a future meeting, we'll walk you through that process. But we now know how much it costs us to serve a residential customer and how much it costs to serve a commercial customer. We have two ways to get that cost recovered. One is through base fees and the other is through your volumetric rate. So essentially though, what we oftentimes will find, just again, we haven't run the numbers yet, but oftentimes what we'll find, just pure algebra, is on the residential side, just because there are 9,000 meters, we recover greater percentage of that total cost from the base charge, resulting in residential volumetric rates being, in general this is a typical case, would be lower. On the commercial, we recover a smaller proportionate share of that bill from the base rate, just because there are fewer customers who are using less more water. So we have that inverse. And so that's one way. And if you look at other communities, sometimes you'll commercial water are actually higher than residential. And that's why. It's just because the residential customers, just by numbers, are paying more into that base fee.
One of the things I want to be careful of, especially for apartment complexes, and I don't know, let's say regular, so for sewer, let's say it's 5,000 gallons a month for a regular household of 2.8 people, right? So that's what, $1,500 gallons per month per person. Well, you may find that this apartment complex is a huge user, but it may be only 82 gallons per person per month.
That's correct.
It just looks like a big number, but so we've got higher density, which again, higher density is more sustainable for services, for everything. So I just want to make sure that we don't go and punish somebody because we're not having one subdivision with only one meter. Right. Each house there. And so and we don't have every meter in every apartment. So anyway, I just want to make sure that we're fair. But again, I think that classes are a fair way.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's go on to item 4, which is a frequency of changing your rates. So essentially, we are doing a 5-year plan. So you will get a rate design through 5 years. The question becomes, though, what's your preference and how often you want to change? We can do a design where they will change every year, a little bit at a time. Or we can do some sort of rate design where we say, we're going to change it once this year, and then next year we're not going to have a change and we'll do it again following year. And what usually will happen if we do something like that is this year you'll over recover, next year you'll under recover, but the average you'll break even between the 2 years. It's really, that one is, again, these are purely policy decisions for you all, and what your preference is. Some communities love, we call it the Band-Aid approach, do it once and not have to touch it again. Others like to be able to tweak a little and have be a slower of an increase each year. So it's purely your desire.
I think incremental is more palatable to the community. Feel like we really went up significantly on sewer, which I'm real frustrated. And I would also like to compare some of those increases to, we have some major expense coming up. And I'd asked for this previously, but the option of issuing debt instead of paying cash for some of these significant improvements and commitments that we're on the hook for. Adjusted 5 million from water and sewer into the water and sewer fund, coming projects and expansion. We never saw any kind of comparison about how issuing debt to pay for that would compare, or the impact on the citizen and the rates.
Yeah, I think everybody likes progress, nobody likes change. Right? So if we're going up on our rates my only counterpoint is if we go rates every year, the comments are going to be, you go up on your rates every year. Right? But if we go up too much, I would rather you just smooth it out, just not hit me all at once. Right? So it's no win. So we may want to consider alternating. I don't know, let's say year 1, we go up on our sewer rate. Year 2, we go up on our water rate. Year 3, we go up on our sewer rate. Year 4, we go up anyway. So if we alternate and stagger it, they don't get hit with all of it at the same time every year. I don't know if it's just, this now is just a human factor. We're not incentivizing on here. It's just the human's ability to adapt to change, which ironically, having all the years humans have, we hate change. So I don't know how we ever adapted to it because we just complain all the time. But
Well, and just so you know the way that this will work, take this and obviously recommend rates to you. But the math will be what the math will be first. The calculation will be what the calculation is. And then this is what the calculation says rates should be. And then I think what we'll probably do is kind of get back to the subcommittee, have some detailed discussions with you guys, and then figure out what's palatable and what's not palatable. That's kind of what comes in.
Well, I think to John's point is we can't make this decision in a vacuum because all we're looking at is revenue, but you're basing this revenue policy on expenses. But we're not discussing our policy on our expenditures.
Correct.
And so things that we have to do is make sure we minimize the negative impact of spending too much and like spending it all at once. And so we have these rates that go way up to do it on cash, and then it's flat for 20 years. Where if we build in some debt, we might can have a lower rate because we're not having to generate as much cash.
And we're sharing it with folks that are going to be using it down. Not
Future.
trying to pay for it out of us.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah. So I think we need to definitely factor in the cash usage into that to really, this has been a hard year for people, water, sewer, but also just financially high interest rates. And so this is going to come right on the tail of that.
Hard year, several years, and water bill. I mean, we administer the 211 call center for help, and water bills is in the top 7 or 8 still, a water bill. So we've already gone up a lot. I see it on my own bills that can barely make their ends meet, and not making their ends meet. I want to be very cautious about the impact to the residential homeowner, apartment owner, the citizen.
We're trying to plan for 5 years out, what we're expecting, the costs that we expect, employees, insurance, debt issues, all those kinds of things. And so there needs to be flexibility in the plan. If a debt issue that we're expecting 2 years out doesn't happen, we have the flexibility of deferring those cost increases that might be planned in that year. So it has to be some built-in flexibility, even if we have your plan that says in year 3, we go up X amount.
I don't know what 5-year plan we've stuck to it to the T, all 5, right? It just, based on feedback and the way the weather's been, we've made slight modifications.
1 year.
There's only so much we can shake the crystal ball.
Right.
It's that in there, I think we can all agree in the last couple of years, and none of us would have predicted everything we've been through in the last 3 years.
And as you said, Mayor, we can't forget it's the expense side. It's driving the revenue collection.
Yeah.
And, let's be honest, we've got a lot of cost in front of us. And have incurred here recently. And so that's carve it out how we want to carve it out. But revenue recovery is still going to have to probably accelerate
But I
to meet
think the
that.
sharing and classes, we can do it as fairly as it can be done.
Absolutely.
Equitably.
And I think that's exactly where you're at right now, is that to continue, so we've historically come in and kind of just gotten your fun where you're healthy, where we're not playing catch up. And now we can start really digging deep policy issues to get to a little bit more equity among your customers as you're encountering these future changes.
I think communication as we ever roll out anything is going to be really, really important. Proactively strategic communication.
Melissa, are you seeing many communities in Central Texas at least that are using incentives to encourage homeowners to plant less? I was jokingly said that like God didn't intend for us to grow St. Augustine in Central Texas. So,
The incentives really good, you know, to get to zero-scaping is you've got to get some grant money or some other funding. Once upon a time, those tiered rates we talked about, it used to be the base rate cover the cost and everything additional was about supporting a water conservation program. In this day and age, unfortunately, water utilities they've got to use every penny just to pay the bill. But once upon a time, and it's certainly, again, to the policy discretion of the city, you could have your base rate, your lowest rate tier be the cost, you know, whatever that serving every customer cost is. And then every incremental penny you get above that, you could pour into incentives for zero and toilet replacement and shower head replacement and all of those things. That's certainly an option available to the city. But again, that would be, you know, totally policy.
Well, from a market standpoint, the best incentive is I want to go to the lowest rate. So if we give a underwater, like an 80% rate for the lowest users, and then if you gave 120% rate for the highest users, there's going to be an economic incentive. You can say, hey, for this amount, I can return on investment. It'll pay for my own capital. So I think it's probably good to his point that we need to create enough incentive in the rates so people know that it's there, not 2 cents.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
And I had a thing on this one. Yeah, that left me. Okay. So rate changes, we're gonna look at that. Item 5.
These
Yep.
are the items that we prepared.
I heard
Yeah,
item
you
5. So what was the one that we
there's-
said we needed to.
Is whatever,
No, we're good.
what other input do you all have?
What was the one that you said we'll do that as item 5?
12-month rolling average thing.
Oh, the rolling average. I will say that, yeah, I will say this, and if we do I think my only, if we don't do the winter average, the people that have to pay for the extra, it would be nice for us to allow them to pay for that over X months instead of a one-time fee. And say, hey, they could do this instead of paying $1,000 and then having this other meter that they pay whatever 1,000 by 18, and then they pay X number of dollars a month. I don't know, but if we, that's the only comment I would have. Now I remember what the other thing I was going to say. There's a lot of people in Belton that call the 211 that don't have the money. There's small houses, there's retired couples or retired widow or widower that really are on the loan, and they're starting, some of them are getting priced out just because of taxes on property. I think in the water and sewer, we need to have a class at the bottom, subsidized by everybody for it, because it's not a lot of money.
And
But
a great solution to that might be using the winter averages. If you're under a minimum of 2,000 gallons a month or whatever threshold we come up with, that your base rate is X, and it's almost a single parent at home who's not using much can be penalized, and isn't going to be out there watering their yard or flushing the toilet.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. That is how you would do it, both between your winter averaging and your tiered rates would achieve that. I would discourage against having a class being like a lifeline rate or something that's actually defined, because that becomes an administrative nightmare and people try to game the system and grandma signs somebody's, whatever.
If owners out there spending $1,000 a month to keep his lawn green.
That's on
he can
him.
afford it, and good for him. But
Exactly.
if it's,
Exactly, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think though, that the two, well, really a couple things. One, the customer class billing will assist with that. The tiered rates will assist with that, as will the winter averaging. All of those things will help that exact thing. The couple who's living in an apartment complex, they're using the bare minimum. They're not the ones putting all of this on the system.
All right, any other comments or questions? That sound good?
Great. Well,
Thank you.
if anything does come up, your staff does know how to find me, and we'll be coming back to you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item 10, receive a presentation on the recommendation of City's Beautification Committee. Mr. Listy. Almost done.
Mayor, I'd like to ask Councilmember Carpenter if he had any initial comments before I make the presentation on the committee's
Well,
recommendations.
just briefly, Randy's here representing the committee, and appreciate the mayor and the council all appointing really top quality folks for that committee. We really had good turnout for we had the input. And I think that's critically important for our future of community, is to continue to encourage community participation and let them guide us and think this. So I was very pleased with that. So I appreciate Matt and Sam and the staff doing that as well. So looking forward to getting started. So
Very
thank
good.
you, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate your leadership on the group. And this is the committee that met several times during the last 6 months or so. Just kind of go through a little bit of that. Council established the committee in February of this year. The group met 5 times, and you can see many of the topics. The group came with lots of ideas about what we could do to try to enhance beautification in the community. Principal focus being downtown, but certainly the expanded Imagine Belton area as well. And so themed artwork was one component, historic elements. Randy brought an idea, Chamber Parade of Stars, Longhorns. There's all kinds of different ideas you can see. Murals was obviously an important one. And the idea was, with some leadership and some guidance on these kinds of components, and the expression of interest with development as it occurs, these things could be done and could really be an asset in the community. A really strong sense emerged that identifying these up front in conjunction with our development standards and perhaps some incentives could have some positive outcomes. The first recommendation of the committee is a strong emphasis on murals. Murals on buildings represent the first priority, and some of the obvious reasons for that. A fairly simple, low cost, impactful approach. They're changeable, and some could change over time, basically. And so a lot of discussion about policies and trying to be sure what those standards are, especially if we're going to be spending public dollars on those. And so there was a strong suggestion to solicit interest among business owners as we go forward. Obviously, if you have a mural, we needed to add a definition in our sign ordinance for murals. And so these are just some words basically we picked up from a couple of different ordinances to add to our sign ordinance that we would need to do as we go forward. Policies are also important, and these are we have a lot of detail of this in the report. I just picked up the headings basically of the different components, but things that are important to a community as you go through this process of mural development and encouragement is obviously securing permission, be very conscious about the location, the types of materials, and then to the content, respecting local culture and history. Obviously, safety is an important consideration, and then avoiding content, again, especially if we're participating in the funding of that. And again, these are detailed in the report to a great extent, but just wanted to give you a flavor of that. Second recommendation, landscaping was highlighted as something that we could certainly build upon as a complementary priority. Again, simple, modest cost, quick and visible impacts. There was some discussion of adding planters in the downtown, and very quickly Parks under Matt's leadership went out and found some planters basically, and I'll show you some pictures of those in a quick second. And so those got installed, and already have some plants in a number of those. Began some dialogue with Eldridge Nurse about maintenance agreement to take care of those, not only those, but perhaps some other locations of the downtown area to, again, have a theme of improved landscaping in the downtown area. And then bench or built seating was also mentioned in the vicinity of the landscape treatment as well. Here you can see some of the examples of the planters. Again, the vision obviously up at the top, and then the one here kind of shows some seating area. And so, as I mentioned, we did buy 4 of those through the Parks Department budget. They have committed to alternate the landscaping, and we already have a draft contract with Eldridge to take on that work. And so again, it's something we'd like to experiment with. It already has had some positive effect and impact. And so we'd again like to build on that approach to, again, add some color and some beautification to the downtown area. The Belton entry signage, something we talked about for years and years.
Yes,
And we just haven't really been able to pull it off just yet. And so that was another priority, and I'll show you some examples here in just a second as well. The 4th recommendation was to kind of set aside the idea of themed elements. Those elements all have their place. A lot of communities try that and try to solicit support for those. But from our group's standpoint and recommendation, they had limited interest. They were a higher cost. The sense was they had more limited impact. And once you make the investment in them, they're pretty permanent. And so you got this high cost. And what if, sense of the community changes and you don't want those anymore? And so just not a commitment the group was going to recommend at this particular point in time. These are some of the specific funding recommendations. An expansion in the facade grant component, that's an important one. We did add, we saw this coming through the budget process, and our annual $50,000 allocation to TERS was increased to $150,000 to allow additional opportunity for murals to be a component of facades. Again, facade grants are public right-of-way locations basically on the face of the building. And so we felt like that would be an eligible component. But we did some expansion in the TERS budget to accommodate that, and an increase of allocation, where right now $10,000 is set aside for a FIG grant. We're proposing 25 out of a $50,000 project. So an increase to accommodate not only the facade, but also perhaps a mural. Building structure grants was another one that was recommended. We run into all the time folks that have trouble with asbestos and ADA accessibility, other kinds of things, and we really don't have a program for that. And so this is one that perhaps could be by BEDC or the city or a combination. I did present it to BEDC last week, and they said they would take it under consideration, but obviously not finalized just yet. Some of these we have to do a little bit more work to implement them, but we want to bring the ideas forward to you. Public infrastructure grants, again, could be funded by a variety of sources, TERS, BEDC, our utility department, where there's a need for something like the East Street project, where we got a grant for that. There certainly are opportunity or needs where old utility lines are in place and might need to be upgraded. And so again, trying to provide some opportunities where infrastructure can be a challenge. And then a foundation grant, Joelle has done some work on this. We've had some experience with Walmart, and Scott and White has supported the senior center. And so there's a number of programs and opportunities out there for us to take advantage of. And we want to be a resource in that particular way to folks who might need that opportunity. So the fiscal effect of all these elements, we'll just run through these real quick. The landscaping elements are pretty nominal. The planters have already been put by the Park Department and deployed. A little bit of funding for landscaping, about $500. The Eldridge agreement is for $8,000, and there is funding in the Parks Department budget to accommodate that. We had allocated some money for contract. We'd like Eldridge to take care of not only the planters, but also the area in front of City Hall, Central Avenue, Patriot Plaza and some other things. So again, providing some uniform maintenance in those areas,
Is all that included in that?
which
All of that you just listed is included?
all the maintenance contract agreement
Yeah.
is with them. They would take that
Of
over.
all the things you just listed?
Yeah. Yes.
And does that include changing out, as seasons change, the plants, the
Yeah.
color?
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, there may
Wow.
be nominal costs here and there, but absolutely.
We buy the plants.
What Margaret does,
Oh, yeah.
that team, yeah, so.
Right. Yeah. Reinforce their efforts.
Probably that, I mean, it's part of the annual
Yeah.
maintenance fee.
The big expansion I mentioned already, we have that funding set aside, so there's no increase in the budget for that. But we're anticipating the potential of 6 $25,000 grants. Again, when somebody spends 25, we would allocate 25. It would take a policy change for the FIG. And also a component of this expansion would be to expand to the Imagine Belton boundary from just the core downtown area as we move outside. Building structure grants, we're suggesting $100,000, and again, perhaps a combination of city and BEDC, or if BDC can fund that, if they can find it within the authority of the 4A to do that, we'd like to encourage that. Infrastructure grants, $100,000 would be some seed money to get that started, that available as development might express itself. Foundation grants, no cost really. I mean, it's a inherent cost. We have staff support for that, but no dollar allocation basically beyond staff. The murals, we're suggesting $50,000, 5 murals, about $10,000 each. Would accomplish that, and we feel really good about that.
Have we identified artists for this yet?
We have had artists come forward. Another one sent me a note yesterday, and we have a couple in waiting. We have certainly locations that have been identified as well.
I'll save my other question.
Okay. And then welcome to Belton signage. We feel like for 1,000, we could do one, and then beyond the first one, once we identify a location and a design, that'll be fun. We would encourage partnership, in future years with civic clubs and other folks, Leadership Belton and others that could accomplish that. So you can see the overall cost is, depending on the funding source, could be distributed among a number of different entities. Just put this up to show the examples of the murals and the breakdown of the mural cost. About $7,500 for the mural itself, and about $2,500. We're anticipating or suggesting a 5-year lease term with a building owner. We would, work with the building owner to determine the content of the mural. We would hire artists to do that, and then we would commit to maintain the mural over the 5-year term of the lease. The compensation to the owner would be the mural itself. And if perhaps things change over time where they need to change the name of the business or the person actually occupying the business. So we feel like that's a reasonable cost and something that's very realistic. And then the Welcome to Belton signage, you can see here, lots of folks in the area have taken that regard. The Liberty Park sign is a pretty good size sign, and we did that for less than $10,000, as I recall. And obviously tons of locations where we have the opportunities for all the state highways, north and south I-35, Main Street, I-14 east and west. And again, recommending one location at this point in time to kind of get started, basically. And we certainly will pursue and evaluate the grants that are out there. Is my understanding the TxDOT ones have gone away at a point in time. So our conclusion and recommendation to you is to ask for your direction to implement the recommendations of the Beautification Committee. Obviously, it's not a done deal because there'll be issues that have to come back. The sign ordinance amendment, policy change for TERS, for the Imagine Belton to expand the boundary of the TERS to that area. Other components to implement these recommendations, working on funding with the different groups that I mentioned. But there is some seed money. There's obviously the planters already in place. So there's some elements already working. With your support, we would proceed to continue to implement these items over the next year.
Can you go back to the pictures?
Sure.
$15,000 for the sign. Are you saying what sign would that get us? Which one of those pictures? Like, is the Temple one 15,000? I don't think so.
I think that's six figures.
The Liberty Park sign was how much, Matt?
Yeah, I
It
mean,
was
today's
under
dollars, it'd be
50.
about
About 15. I think it was 10 or 11, basically. So Liberty Park, and that's a big sign, 72 by 90.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I just, if we're gonna put something on the interstate, I don't want people to drive like by that one and then that's what we got. Like,
Yeah.
if we're gonna do it, I want to do something. I just don't want to do it just to do it. That'd be my.
Okay.
input
All right.
there.
That's good input.
Sam, a couple of points, and Keep Texas Beautiful, statewide program, offers a lot of resources, structure, exposure, as well as grants and awards. And so I don't know if it's possible, but I think it would be helpful to be a part of Keep Texas Beautiful.
Okay.
And possibly apply for grants and awards through there. And then also a funding mechanism. You know that the city of Temple allows citizens to donate an extra amount through their water bill each month. We might not want to have people volunteer so much, but if we added 50 cents to the credit card charge on the water bill, and just, I think some sort of funding mechanism that's reoccurring and automatic greatly enhance the program and the process. When there are dollars there for a committee to use, and it's replenishing, sure helps. And what a great opportunity, a great program, especially for a small community. And the only other thing that I would encourage is that if we're doing landscaping or planters or whatnot, is that we also consider irrigation and maybe possibly some lighting.
Sure.
I know Temple's done a great job with some of those big planters downtown that they're irrigated. And that those trees and flowers really look pretty good year round.
Sure, that's a great idea. We talked a bit about irrigation, Matt. You might mention that one item that we talked about this morning, the watering of the planters.
Self-watering desert planters.
Yes,
They were a mountain laurel that were put in there originally. Very nice. Just didn't quite make it through the summer. I think we want to be conscious of that. So the agreement with Eldridge would be that they're coming around routinely. They already are doing so around with the downtown group. But I think we would try the approach. The irrigation, it can be done. It's just a lot of street cuts at the corners of Central Avenue and East Street to kind of get that. This may be an opportunity just to see how, if we can get something established, and then, obviously if it takes that, we'll cut the street. Get it done.
But down the road, if we do redo a street or something,
sure.
that part of the process.
Yeah, I think for any, we've talked about like anything that we do, we redo a road, we need to think about burying utilities and adding in space for irrigation or for planters or for trees that we can plant, because we do need a less concrete look and more organic. So two comments I had. One is, it was mentioned on lighting. I really think that there's an opportunity in downtown Belton to work with property owners to get string lights and something like that to really, so whatever we have would then kind of pop what we would go, because at night you would not see it. So I think that we need to, I think lighting is a really good comment. The other one is the most iconic mural that probably between Austin and Waco is in the city of Belton. It didn't used to be the city of Belton, but we've annexed the spill. That is in need of repair. I don't know who it was that originally painted it. I know that the refurbishment effort probably another 20 years. So I think probably 40 years ago, it was painted the first time. I think maybe UMHB involved in that.
Yeah, Herschel was on our committee and we talked about that. There was obviously some interest in redoing that. That certainly should be something we ought to take on as well.
I think whether we do it, since it's in the city, I think we should help drive that because it's needed. It's already you can't really see it.
Yeah.
And so, so I think that while it's not a specific recommendation, murals is, I think we need to think about doing that. And the way they did it, I don't know if you remember, anyway, it was like paint by numbers. So somebody went out there and then just volunteers got up with ladders and they painted it. And then I think the artistic student maybe gone to touch it up, but like the bulk of it was done. Yeah. So I think that it may be a good community activity, maybe a yak thing, or I don't know. There's just anyway. So I think it
needs attention.
The other thing, the big picture on that one is, do we want to take the artistic liberty to update it? Because the high tech modern era where Fort Hood is at the end is 30 plus years old.
Mhm.
So I don't know. So just something.
It's even older than that.
Yeah.
With the murals, would the property owner be the one that drives the design on that?
I think it would be a collaborative effort.
Okay.
You know, certainly if there's something they are trying to, there was a lot of discussion in the group about whether it could be advertising or whether it was be more Belton iconic type of thing. And so I think we'd work with property owners on that. And obviously the funding for that would partly drive it as well. You know, if it's a city sponsored, obviously if they want to do something themselves, it'd be more an independent effort. But if we're going to fund it, it ought to be a collaborative effort between us and the property owner.
And then, was there any discussion about kind of spiffing up the roundabout at Sparta? Just because it's not bad, but it's also a little underwhelming. I feel like I think that you could invest a little landscaping there.
Okay, all right, Matt.
Noted. Thank you.
Got a spare. Got a spare tree you might want to donate to the.
Today,
Don't get a map.
yeah, to the point, Christmas is an ideal. I know we do a little Christmas
bit of
thing, but
tree,
it's more kind of, I don't want to say anything negative. It's an underwhelming few on some really thin strings. So,
We'll work on that one. Those are some
On the
great
murals,
additions.
I would really suggest on the murals that y'all have final say
yeah, I
on
agree.
those.
If it's going to be public dollars,
I mean, that's just wide open. Some of these murals could be, and there needs to be an end point, and it probably needs to be with you.
Well, if it's through the sign ordinance, we.
Well, that just
we're already. This is not going to come to a sign ordinance.
Sam, one last thing I think would be a neat joint effort for the group is to work with the county and the courthouse or the downtown square. After having an event down there this summer, there's a large number of low-lying limbs and people couldn't see the stage. They were hitting their head. It was dark in certain areas. And I think about Georgetown Square and how just they've really put a big effort into lighting that up, cleaning it up, taking the tree canopy up.
Okay.
Wouldn't take much to really spruce that up. And it's not
Judy and
ours.
Matt. Sure. No, that's good. It's great.
Sure would be. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the
that's
committee's
exciting.
work and
Awesome.
we'll, if
Very good.
we need any action or just basically direction to proceed to implement with additional comments. Okay.
Proceed.
Yeah,
Thank you all very much.
absolutely.
Appreciate it.
All right. That's the last item that we have on the regular agenda. So we will adjourn the council meeting. We'll take a 5-minute recess. There's no action after the